Good morning, distinguished colleagues. I'm happy to welcome all of you here at the session of GAIDA Forum on how to make public services truly accessible. Today, it is government services that are the interface between the government and the public, and it is underpinned by the principles which are being shaped today. Any citizen can access these services, and these services become the face of the government, the initial point of contact. This is why every effort needs to be made to make it as accessible as possible. Any person here in Russia, regardless of their background or identity, needs to be able to get access to them. We know that all the mass e-government services need to be provided electronically. These services need to be client-centric and as accessible as possible. And this is why civil society and public officials will focus heavily on making sure that this is possible. And some of the e-government services could be critically important for the people. At RANEPA, at the Center for Chief Digital Transformation Officers and Teams, we did a research together with Google. We focused on 30 government services, 4 different aspects of accessibility, and we hope by the end of the winter we'll be able to make the results, the findings public. And today, I'd like to kickstart this discussion, and I believe it will be one of the essential debates in 2022. Let's talk of what are the risks, what are the challenges, and what are the solutions out there. I'd like to introduce our speakers. Dmitry Oguryaev, Deputy Minister of Digital Development, Dmitry, Satin founder and a partner at USABILITYLAB, Alexey, Sklyar, Deputy Minister of Labor and Social Protection, and Olga Skorokhodova, Deputy Head of GR Google Russia. And my first question will go to Olga. What is Google doing in researching this issue? What aspects and challenges do you see here? Thank you, Ksenia. It's great to start off 2022 with a debate on such an important issue. Usability and accessibility, it underpins everything we at Google do. Our mission is to make the information accessible to everyone, to present it in an orderly, comprehensible way, and our job is also to enable other companies to get the right tools. We also work on a regular basis with our consumers to make sure we understand what accessibility is for them. This is why we're happy to team up with your center at RANEPA to do a research, to do a study on accessibility. Our definition is quite broad. Services need to be truly accessible to everyone. Functionality is important. It needs to be user-friendly and comprehensible. I think it applies to any service, whether it be public or private. Accessibility is also about the skills that the users need to have to be able to leverage those services. Google in general and Google Russia puts a lot of focus on this particular aspect. One of the central projects in late 2021 was the launch of online competences website together with Google. It's a part of a major campaign that is currently online in 50+ countries, and about 900,000 people from Russia have been able to use the tools that are available on the website to learn new digital technology. Why is it important? It's not a new idea, but I'd still like to focus on it. Digitalization does have a strong impact in terms of economic development. I'd like to share some of the figures. We, together with Alphabet from Singapore, we did some calculations in terms of further capacity. Digitalization could add another 25% in terms of economic growth by 2030. That's 51 billion, and any further improvements could add an extra $46 billion to the Russian economy. This is why Google certainly focuses on making digital accessible, and we do not limit our efforts to our corporate services, so we're always teaming up with other players in the market, so we're ready to share and enable that synergy with the government. Thank you so much, Olga. I'd like to go to the services themselves, and during the survey we did that is about to be published, we found out that despite some progress, there's still a lot of room for improvement in terms of design, user-friendly features, in terms of the language. Dmitry, would you agree with the fact that there's still a lot of room for improvement? Colleagues, good morning. Yes, we agree with that. There are two reasons. First, historically, we've never focused on it. There was a Russian Soviet movie which featured people with their needs living on one planet and officials with their own ideas living on another planet. But back to 2022, there's a lot of legacy issues. Officials have some issues with being customer-centric, with getting feedback. And reason number two is that we don't have mandatory global standards in this area. That's a huge gap. And I'd like to cite some, or to go back to Vladimir Mayakovsky's poem, What is Good and What is Bad. And I think we need to write such a poem for all civil servants, and it needs to be enshrined in law as a one big standard. So it's not going to happen overnight, but we need to go along this path, and I think we're making the first steps along this way. It's an uphill battle. We focus on e-government services. It's gosuslugi.ru. We interact with different ministries and agencies. We work on different services. And since there's so much diversity, life itself has forced us to come up with one major set of benchmarks in terms of accessibility, and we will try to roll out more or less similar services to support consistency of user experience. And we also have an additional website, guides.gosuslugi.ru, and these are like guidelines on what's good, on what's bad in terms of user interface. And so we believe that this website, guides.gosuslugi.ru, has to become part and parcel of the guidelines and the standards for the entire public sector. Thank you so much, Dmitry, Satin. Alexey, Sklyar, over to you. What's your take on this issue? Do you agree with what we said, that there are still some accessibility issues? Hi everyone. Thank you, Ksenia, for this excellent question. We believe that there is this issue of accessibility, and Dmitry and myself, we are not experts in this area. We execute those programs. And it's much easier to be an expert than those who work on those issues. I believe we've seen a lot of progress, and that's been supported by millions of services provided in 2021 alone. As we provide services, sometimes proactively, and they're being accepted by, embraced by our citizens, we focus on visualization, user interface, graphic interface, UX, UI, as it's known. But visualization is not the biggest issue. I think it's the content and the processes that could be the biggest stumbling block.
Это, знаете, как, допустим, что такое гайд или что такое UX, это хорошее,
So it's like
дизайн,
having a great design of a device.
за ним как бы
But
работает не так, как
if your device looks great, but it doesn't work in the right way, then definitely you would not be happy. And that reveals some of the root causes. So, for example, we send an application and we're waiting for an answer from a government service and waiting for several hours. And we need to visit some institution, some agency, and we need to bring some papers. That's an issue. And that points to where those root causes are. We need to focus a lot on UX, UI, but I guess the key area is in the back end, in the back office. So we need to come up with activities that would yield this target model. And we've been working on it. We've been providing excellent support. So the target model is when you provide services proactively, when there's some event that a person has, if they have a child, or they reach the retirement age, or a child reaches some age, and they receive that service proactively, and they don't even need to click a button or ask for anything. So they get some money, they get some benefits to their bank card without asking for it. So there's no front office, so to speak. But there might be some exceptions if we cannot execute this proactive, we cannot execute some service proactively. For example, using the money from your maternity capital, as it's known here in Russia. These are maternity benefits. We need to provide some minimum must-have requirements. The very minimum, to make sure that people don't need to go and bring some papers, to minimize the amount of data they need to fill in. Well, that's great news. So proactivity could become something like 100% accessibility. So you work on your front end, and actually, if the users don't need to fill in the data, to ask for anything, if this service is going to be provided automatically because there's a trigger for a particular life event, then we won't need the front end at all. But I guess there will still be some exceptions, and there will be front-end issues, and we may leverage some of the experience of the private sector. So maybe we need to tap into the experience of the business community. And I'd like to ask Ms. Skorokhodova and Dmitry Satin, could there be some synergy between the business community and the government? What's your take?
Пожалуй, здесь
Yes. Google, as a global corporation, does have huge experience in working with the government in terms of improving e-government services. Here's an example from India. You can sign up for a vaccination using a voice assistant. Google Assistant can work in 8 languages. English is important. We know that India has a big diversity of languages. And so we help the government to make vaccines available, accessible for some categories who cannot use a smartphone, who are underserviced. And I'd like to follow up on what I said earlier. Google focuses a lot on digital skills, and we're doing this in Russia too, and I'm so happy that we have Alexey, Sklyar, who represents the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. Why? In late 2021, we launched a dedicated section on digital skills for people with disabilities on our platform. So people with disabilities, particularly in terms of health, they're struggling with the digital services, and we've been trying to help them, and there's been a lot of positive feedback from those users, and I hope we can continue working with the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection on this. And this is just one area where we can see some synergy between the business community and the government. And it's not just about digital skills for specific groups of people. Again, we need to be proactive in terms of providing e-government services. And we also need to apply this to SMEs. Entrepreneurs need to get those digital skills and get those e-government services in a faster, better way. We also have a business class program, which we launched back in 2016 for SMEs, together with Sber, Russia's biggest bank, and it's a online course, and it was quite a pioneering course back in 2016, and there are about 20 courses, 1 million registered users. We've been helping those SMEs receive e-government services in the right way, to use the status that they have with all the benefits. Together with VEB, Venetian Economic Bank, we launched a digital literacy course to help people get those benefits. Together with Skorokhodova, we launched a course on social entrepreneurship, and we talk about the status of a sole proprietor. We talk about different support measures that you're eligible for. We also talk about a course. We also launched a course for self-employed. Anyone can launch their business from the comfort of their home. You can use the technology to get all the necessary benefits from the government. And finally, I believe that those success stories is an efficient way to address some issues in terms of accessibility, particularly in terms of e-government services. And I'm also happy to see that the number of those success stories is growing, and we'll be following that trend. Thank you so much, Ms. Skorokhodova. Those joint courses, as you said, the training, sharing insights, joint collaboration. This really looks impressive. Mr. Oguryaev, Dmitry, over to you. Dmitry, Satin. Can you share some experience on how you can help with design and visualization? So, thank you, definitely. I've been waiting for a breakthrough for 14 years. You said you want to have a breakthrough in 2022. Actually, Russia signed on to the Convention on the improving the rights and the living standards for disabilities, and that was a long time ago, and that's extremely important. Not all of our speakers realize what is accessibility. It's not that you see some object lying on the floor and you can come up to it and pick it up. No, it means that it should also be available for disabled persons. We offer consulting services in UX and accessibility. And I think that there is some vague understanding of what is accessibility is, because there are different nuances in the Russian equivalent of this word. And whenever we talk to the clients, they'll give you the worst example. How many disabled people we have in Russia? And we tell them, okay, you can look up some official stats. And the second question, what about our audience? How many disabled persons are there among our target audience? And they say, well, you know, it's not really significant. It's like, it's like Nazis talking to each other. We focus on just official numbers, but, people need to wear glasses. They have, some other disabilities. For example, you injure your hand and you can't really use your phone anymore. So you might be struggling with those services if the usability is not designed the right way. This is why we need to make sure that people with disabilities need to live a full life. And while we're here, take blind people. We engage them in our surveys, and they tell us that very often they get married. And if you don't have a single person who can see, so if you get registered on a website and they have some like a capture, evil captures, Google has good captures, captures which could only be recognized by eyesight, and there are no alternative ways. Then they need to call up someone, and they can't be, perhaps there is no person who can see, and then these services will not be provided to them. And sometimes it could be critically important services, and they will not be able to live on without them. The pandemic has taught us that these peak services, the peak workloads can emerge at any time, and this is the most vulnerable groups, and they're struggling because they are ignored. And I agree with Dmitry that we need some regulation. The government needs to regulate that and to provide the right financing if they believe it's a priority.
If you would talk about ratifying the convention I started to talk about, so Russia needs to fix its national law to be in line with the convention. In 14 years, we saw that there were some advanced regulators like Sberbank of Russia, so they published some very served letters, and we started to rate mobile applications of banks. And it was something which acted as an incentive. It was the ratings were based on a volunteering basis. We tested 15 banks. The ratings became annual. We see that banks tend to compete, to rank high on them. And when we discuss accessibility, it's not enough to produce one mobile app. In 2 years maximum, the new team would arrive, and they would not be in the culture. And they can tell you, so let's destroy what we had and develop a new app from scratch. And quite often that was the case with banks and there was criticism from visually impaired users that I cannot dispose, I cannot manage my finances. And there was an initiative from the All-Russian Society of Blind People, and it's they have a wonderful person, Vasily, who teaches blind people to use mobile apps. And Vasily informed us that there was some great deal of interest towards the topic in 2016, but now the situation is getting worse. And I believe that in developers' team, competencies were lost, and there is a change of generation, and such things are possible. So such regulations should become mandatory. We have standards on usability translated by the Russian standards. They are added to the register of national standards, but they are on the level of recommendations. We cannot criticize the developer for failing to do anything. And it's not clear to me what government agency should focus on the topic. In the Bank of Russia, there was a meeting, and the chairman of the bank was moderating the meeting. So we cheered that important people were listening to us, and we wrote a big plan, a memorandum, but it was declined. The answer was it's not possible for us to interfere in the activities of banks, and my concern is that we need a regulation to approve these regulations. We heard a number of times that we need regulatory documents to set these standards, not recommendations for developers, as mentioned by Alexey. So developers lead a harder life than experts. Well, do you think this is the only thing you need to do to make digital services more available? Or is there anything else that can be done? Olga, what would you believe? Is this the key for success? Thank you, Ksenia. As somebody representing business here, I would like to share principles we use in our work. Because, as I said, for us, developing inclusive, generally accessible, as Dmitry said, services is really important for us. So the user should be the top priority, the principle we use in our work, and I believe that's about being customer-oriented, and it's good that we have these discussions at the level of government, that being client-oriented is the priority. If we would talk about particular recommendations, accessibility at the basic level of service design should come first. Also, accessibility for testing. And as the service would function, it is important. We need to understand that services should not be developed for an ideal, an abstract user, but the goal is that the philosophy that user comes first would help to develop a product for users, including disabled people. And I would like to give you an example of our products, Android platform, which was initially developed as an open source platform. And if you have a smartphone that uses Android, you can attach the special device. You can install a Braille back app to manage and correct Braille font, which is relevant for many disabled users. I think I saw UN statistics, and I'm not talking about just disabled people, but people with limitations, and there are a lot of users, well, I would say people. UN gave us the figure that there are 1 billion people in the world with limitations. I don't remember which UN Commission it was, and I would like to tell you that Google tries to integrate testers with limitations for testing the services, but also develops products other companies can use to test their products for their inclusive nature. And we have a training course available for every developer. It's focused on training on making services accessible. It's called accessibility. It's free and available for everyone. You have accessibility scanner, an app that allows you to audit your application to fix bottlenecks. So it's about the color matching, scaling fonts, Google Chrome browser used by a big number of Russians. So it has Google Vox, a special plugin that activates reading from the screen, or every owner of a web resource can audit if the website is accessible. There is Lighthouse, a special tool that would analyze 30 parameters of a website. All those services are available, and I'm based on the preliminary resource. So we have the preliminary result of the test. The project was done with RANEPA digital transformation team. So it's about analysis of rendering colors and scaling fonts, and tools our company has and other leaders of the market have. So such tools could be used to improve accessibility of digital e-government services. Thank you, Olga. To be brief, I realized that we need to study best practices and use multiple free of charge tools provided by Google, among others. Now, Dmitry, going back to regulation, as you mentioned, is it the only thing important? What else can be done to improve accessibility right now? Okay, let me share my opinion. What's accessibility for us? Accessibility has a number of levels in the wider sense of the world. So people from age from 14 to 100 years should understand it, and you need a special standard that allows navigation to be clear for both 14-year-old and 100-year-old people. It should be clear. That's the higher level, but also you have the Web Content Accessibility Guide, an international one, and there are enthusiasts in Russia, and they GOST standards. Sberbank of Russia was the first company. They were a pioneer of Russian business. And there are certain people in Sberbank that are visually impaired, blind people that test every service. It requires labor and costs from the business, so that's why sometimes the business and the government are reluctant to do this job. But we see this strategy. We need to formulate standards which would work as a Lego construction game. You develop smaller cubes, but they would have requirements contained in the international web accessibility guide. You need certain add-ons and plugins. You need to train developers and testers for 2 or 3 days. There are some details, but we need to develop standards that would include the requirements of the international guide. So this is what our strategy is about. So what do you have to do? You need to formulate and legalize national standards. This is step number 1. Step number 2 is to assign a responsible person in every federal agency, a person who would at least know what it is and who would be accountable, who would understand the responsibility for this area. And step number 3 is scaling, replicating in different federal agencies with some bureaucratic work. You also need another standard for monitoring and quality assurance. It's ready. You need to make the same steps bureaucratically, the formal launch of the standards, responsible people in agencies, and training. And with the help of such trivial steps, we can finally arrive by the end of the year to getting a sense of happiness that we started to be success and that now we understand what to do and what is good and what is bad. That's the plan. So you have some hope for the breakthrough. Well, we actually were getting prepared for this breakthrough for 2 years, and last year we tested using blind testers what we have. The results were not that optimistic, but we got an understanding on where to go. We developed a special group, a special team, and we are proactive. The first results would come by the middle of the year, and we will publish our first results when we get them. Okay, now we know what are the points for control. I'm sorry, we are a little bit pressed for time in our section, and we cannot discuss human resources in detail, but I think everyone mentioned it, and I hope that later on we can have a discussion on that, maybe here. Let's complete our today's discussion. Please, I would like to hear summaries from every one of you. Maybe you can make some final statements, or maybe we ignored something important in the context of digital service accessibility. Olga, traditionally we start with you. A couple of minutes, Olga. Yeah, I will try to comment on that even faster. I would like to begin with an optimistic statement. It's important to highlight that digitalization of the e-government services and we made big progress in recent 2 years. We need to mention that there is room for improvement in terms of better accessibility of e-government services, being more oriented on the client, availability in the wider sense of the word, and it's essential to remember that you don't have any ideal of users, but you have a big group of users with different skills, with different opportunities. on how they approach to government resources, and there is a big room for cooperation between business and the company. And as a high-tech company, we have expertise and clear and understandable tools I mentioned we can use for better adaptivity and accessibility, and we would like to share the expertise with all stakeholders involved. Thank you, Dmitry. Very brief. In 2013, I started to work with the Ministry of Communications, and I worked there 2 years, and I was invited by Denis Sverdlov, who was deputy minister back then, and he told us sooner or later all interaction with the state would be digital, and the quality of these digital channels will define if how a citizen perceives the state, the government. It was a challenge, and this is where I went to work for the public sector. But now digitalization is getting stronger. But the statement I heard back then is still relevant. And we should be really careful in our communication with people. And I know that although there were some official releases, the tax office said that they are involved in client-oriented program, and there is a program of developing a federal network of usability labs. I'm not involved in the project, but I know that the central government focuses on it, and I hope that the methodology will include accessibility evaluation, inviting visually impaired and users of senior age. Now, in the Bank of Russia, there is a discussion on what to do people with memory problems. Yeah, I don't know how to do it, but I would like to show you the entire range of limitations. Thank you. I hope that people from that task force will listen to your recommendations. Dmitry. Well, I agree, Alexey. I would like to repeat what Dmitry Satin said. So we work together. A lot depends on us. We have standards. Order 483 from the Ministry of Communications from 2014. Little things changed in 14 years, as we said, and I would not like to be in a situation then in 1 or 2 years' time, nothing changed in 15 years would be the observation. Nothing prevents us from doing what other people do. The Ministry of Labor and other agencies and organizations we work with, if we would talk about the range of social support measures, and without waiting, without analyzing what was ignored in 14 years, we started to focus on disabled people, on people with limitations. Everything was done back in 2021, and I believe that we can complete measures and start providing measures proactively. The disability pension is provided proactively. Also, the single-time payments for 2021 also insurance for vehicles, again proactive. So in 2023, if we meet each other again, I don't think that we will be able to change that, to say that nothing changed. Thank you, Alexey. So not just e-government services should be proactive, but also people responsible for them. Everything is within our hands. And Dmitry, to wrap up with the summaries. Wrapping up the summaries, I would like to repeat standards, implementation, destroying the bureaucratic machine, the cultural perception. And I would like to tell you that by the end of the year we would like to make a little cultural revolution. We want to develop a big construction game that would allow to take new services to the web portal of e-government, and we have a clear goal that after 40 hours of training, every high school student would be able to use it. And we have a lot of trainings in Russia, a lot of training courses, but now the focus is 100% on practice, and we want to integrate these standards on the principles of having nothing excessive and being pure practical. And we believe that this training course in the public sector would allow us to make a little revolution. Okay, let's check it at the end of the year. 45 minutes is too little. Thanks for being with us, and I hope we can continue discussing the topic next year.